It's a wonderful dialogue to have with a customer, which is, what do you think ultimately is the thing that's really holding you back this year? Now let's talk about what AI could do to change that and release that trap value. And all of a sudden their eyes get as big as teacups because it's like, oh, that I'd never thought of that.
Today, I'm speaking with Geoffrey Moore, renowned speaker, consultant, and best-selling author of Crossing the Chasm, the essential guide for tech innovators. Geoffrey has reshaped how leaders approach growth and strategy, helping businesses turn disruption into opportunity. Welcome, Geoff. Thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I believe it's your first time to Australia.
It is indeed, and we're on a beautiful tower, and I'm looking over all of Sydney, and it's amazing.
Well, thank you for making the trip. We really appreciate it. Look, for the folks, I mentioned in the intro that are not familiar with Crossing the Chasm. It's been almost 34 years since that bestseller came out. Can you tell us a little bit about what the framework is that you produced?
Yeah, it was about something called the technology adoption life cycle, and how, depending on where you are in that life cycle, the market expects different things from you. So in the early market, they're looking for innovation, and you build projects that do wonderful things. They don't scale. They're snowflakes. They're one-off things, but they're demonstrations to the world of what could really be successful. Then the chasm is the rest of the world going, well, that's very fine for those special people, but we're just ordinary people. We're not ready for it yet. And so the idea there is crossing the chasm was about how can we find people who have a challenge on the other side of the chasm. Normally they would not adopt technology new, but because they're struggling so much to manage this process, they say, if you can fix this problem, we'll adopt next. And the idea then is as you get those people adopting, as you get more and more people adopting, the rest of the population goes, oh, it is time ready for prime time. And that creates something the opposite of the chasm we call the tornado, which is when everybody says, well, where's mine? Where's mine? Where's mine? And then after all of that, the infrastructure's out there, and that's when you actually can start to make money with it, because now you're no longer just deploying it and training people on it, you're using it day after day, and every year it gets better and better. We call that time Main Street. So the model's organized around the early market, crossing the chasm, the tornado, and Main Street.
What led to you coming up with this? Was there a specific moment in time? Was it the web, or was it, I'm assuming it was before CRM.
It was before, well, what's interesting is the actual life cycle model was actually predated me. A man named Everett Rogers in the 50s and 60s developed it at Harvard. But a man named Regis McKenna, who was sort of the guru of marketing for high tech in the 80s, he was the one who brought it into the Silicon Valley. And I worked for Regis for 5 years. So that's where I really got familiar with it. My contribution was this idea of the chasm. And what prompted that was we would get all these amazing clients. We'd get them the cover of Wall Street Journal or Fortune magazine or whatever it was. And we think, well, these people are off to the races. And then 2 years later, it's like, well,
what happened?
What happened?
Yeah.
And so that's when the chasm thing came in. And my personal realization was visionaries and pragmatists, who are the second and third groups of in the life cycle, don't talk to each other. They don't trust each other. Visionaries think pragmatists are mundane, and pragmatists think visionaries are loose cannons. And so although you have a reference account, it doesn't work, and so that was the problem.
No, it's fascinating. Well, I guess coming to the today and present, you've been out there meeting Australian CEOs, CIOs. I feel like most of them are pragmatists. You tell me, what are you hearing from them?
I think the people that we're meeting with are often people who are trying to evangelize disruptive technology in an institution which is very conservative.
Yeah.
And this led to the most recent book, which by the way was written with the team at Salesforce under Mark and the team at Microsoft under Satya, which is called Zone to Win. And the idea behind that book is, hey, it's one thing for a startup to cross the chasm because they have no other place to go. But if you have an established enterprise, you got a lot of things you can do with your budget without crossing any chasms. And so, and in your core business, and if you're a public company, you're evaluated on your earnings calls, and all those things tend to say, stick with your knitting, stay in your swim lane, do what you did last quarter, only a little bit better with a little bit more profit. So how do you then organize internally to sponsor innovation? And the zone model said, look, there's a performance zone that's running your core business. There's a productivity zone that supports it at scale. It's all fine. It's all the cost centers that support your business. It's 95% of your budget. It's your headcount, everything. But you need an incubation zone. In the incubation zone, you have to manage very differently. And there's a venture capital model for how to do that. And you can implement that outboard of your performance zone and your productivity zone. And those three zones, that's where you do your trial balloons. And then the big challenge is the fourth zone, which you normally do not have active, but it's the one which says, okay, we call it the transformation zone. We are now going to take one of these disruptive things and we are going to bring it to scale, eventually bring it into our performance zone. That's a very, very challenging journey, and that requires total commitment from everybody, led by the CEO. When we have the reluctance in the room, it's often because the people are looking around the table thinking, I'm not sure we have the will to make that journey. Eventually, the market is going to force you to go. But usually established enterprises are not the early adopters, not the first movers. They come in later.
So you obviously met CEOs, CIOs. Are you feeling that they are the trailblazer wanting to push the big organization?
If they're a pragmatist, typically they're not going to move until they feel like, if I don't move now, I'll be left behind.
So if you're one of the big banks, you're not going to move until another bank moves.
Yeah, and so then the question, well, which bank is most likely to move first? What we've learned about that is it's never the market leader. If you're the market leader, why would you disrupt anything? Even if you're number 2, he's like, well, yes, it's still pretty good.
Comfortable.
Yeah, but if you're number 3, 4, 5, the problem you have now is the ecosystem in your industry is organized around the number 1 player. And then they have some resources for the number 2 player. But the more you get down the stack, the less you don't get leads from the infrastructure, you don't get love from the infrastructure. So you actually have a stake that says, look, I got less to lose and more to win by disruption. So it's typically somebody who's 3, 4, or 5 who says, I'm gonna jump this curve and I'm gonna take this disruption, I'm gonna crush those guys.
Right, right. It becomes their strategy.
Yeah, exactly.
What about like the new entrants though? Obviously banking, telco,
fintech. Yeah, you betcha. If you're an incumbent with an established enterprise business, the world isn't asking you to be the first mover.
Right.
What the world is asking you is, don't get so far, but keep up. So in other words, when the fintech people come in the early market, you can watch and learn, but you don't have to do anything. When they cross the chasm, initially you're probably saying, okay, they've got some beachheads here. I have to be aware of them. But if any of that technology starts to move into what we call the tornado, now the world's saying, well, okay, it's no longer acceptable for you to play by the old game. You have to adopt the new operating model.
You've been talking about trapped value, and I think talking about agentic AI. Can you share some examples of what CEOs are thinking about and where you feel the real ROI will be?
Yeah, this is really important. The trap value model says every system traps value somewhere. In other words, no system is perfectly friction-free. There's no perpetual motion machine, right? So it's always somewhere. And the question then becomes, if I'm going to make the next level of progress in my industry in terms of either customer growth or profit growth or expanding my reach, whatever it is, I have to. This is the thing that's holding me back. And so trap value is about, and it's a wonderful dialogue to have with a customer, which is, what do you think ultimately is the thing that's really holding you back this year? Now let's talk about what AI could do to change that and release that trap value. And all of a sudden, their eyes get as big as teacups because it's like, I'd never thought of that.
So some of those, because I've thought about this for my own team, it does require a complete re-engineering of how you might do something. So how do you suggest that either CEOs or departments think about that?
That's what we mean kind of by a disruptive innovation. So that's when you have to bring out that life cycle. And you say, okay, if I'm going to do that for my whole company, who are my early adopters? And initially, you have to get a marquee reference inside your own company. Some executive or some team that says, we want to go first. We will go through all that challenge. And then you have to take them all the way to Bright. So that the rest of the company goes, what?
What are they doing over there?
What happened there? And then I think you have the Crossing the Chasm where you have somebody who says, normally I would not be talking to you guys, but
can you tell us what you did?
Yeah, because I'm really struggling with my stuff. And if you guys can help me with my stuff, I'd be okay. And we call those the pragmatists in pain. And then eventually it's like, well, wait a minute. I want what they have. Why do they have it and I don't have it? And that's when you know
This is resonating with me because I like ANZ as a market. I always do that internally. I'm like, we will be the first ones. So assuming, some leaders have started to do that, how should they be thinking about measuring success? Is it that they've done it?
Once these things get fully adopted, then it's all about ROI. And it's about, you either increased our revenue or you lowered our costs.
The hard metrics.
God bless you. But prior to the tornado, the issue is going to be, we call them power metrics. So power metrics are signs that you have essentially created a wave of adoption or you're starting a wave of adoption that one can then project, wow, this thing is really going to take off. So in the early market, the key metrics are around that marquee customer reference because, again, that does get you notoriety. If you look at a spreadsheet, you can't see notoriety on it. But the PR effect is huge. And that's what gives you permission to do the next step. And then the next step is finding those early repeatable use cases, which are not dramatic, but for the people involved, they're life-changing for them.
Significant, yeah.
In that situation, the local ROI is real, but it's typically from the point of view of the enterprise, it's not that big. Now, if you explain to the enterprise, but that process was actually causing your entire enterprise issues, then they kind of go, oh, okay. But even that doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. It's not until the tornado that you can actually start using the spreadsheets.
So, Geoff, you recently sat down with our Australian New Zealand General Manager, Frank Fillmann,
Yep.
and you developed a white paper, Building an AI-Powered Business in 2025, 6 key questions for executives. Tell us the gist, what are some of these questions? And, we're going to be sharing that link as for everyone to read as well. So what can they get out of that?
This is really important because, we've talked a ton about AI ever since ChatGPT hit the market, but we haven't really built it into our operating plans. And it's now 2 years in, and now with agentic also coming on its hard on the heels of generative. My feeling was you need to have something in you at least need to ask yourself the question, should I have something in my 2025 operating plan? And so the 6 questions, it was like, well, what can AI do really today? And then what use cases would that entail in our world? And what infrastructure would we need in order to do those use cases? And then go through that trapped value analysis thing, which is like, okay, which of those, because you can end up with like hundreds of use cases, and you can probably only do meaningfully 1 or 2. So where's the prize? Where's the way to do that? And then where are we and where's my industry in the technology adoption life cycle? Meaning, if it's early days, I can be voluntary, but I don't have to do it. If it's in the tornado, I better hurry up or I'm going to get left behind. So we apply that model.
Now, I'm going to throw you an interesting question. What does this mean for the consumer?
If you're a consumer in a digital relationship with a company, it's very interesting. We talk about customer experience. But what the consumer actually wants is a non-experience. What they want to do is transact and not even the only experiences they're familiar with are when it doesn't work rather than when it does work. So you don't need to delight the customer. You need to stop annoying the customer. And so I think for the consumer, what you're going to see, particularly with agentic AI, is you're going to see a much more consistent, approachable, non-experience oriented with the systems. On the other hand, if you're in a relationship business, like a wealth management business or whatever, you're going to see, I think, a much better informed, much more responsive representative from your vendor, because there's an incredible amount of institutional knowledge that doesn't get shared. And we used to have knowledge management systems, and we'd say, okay, well, we're going to put it all in a knowledge management system. Well, what did we do? We took every presentation deck we ever had and threw it in a database, and nobody...
And now it's dusty, sitting there.
Exactly. So what's amazing about generative AI is when you take that dusty old database, you don't have to do anything with it except expose it to the large language module. It is a small language module that you then put the large language module on top of so that it can extract and process that nature. And then what you say to one of your relationship managers is, just ask the question. At any moment, you can pull it out by prompting it to say, here's what my client's dealing with. What do you know about this? And it's game changing.
Final question, Geoff. Where do you think, obviously, all of this is going? Is it accelerating? Can leaders sit down now, plan for 2025 and be done? Or is this, where is this all going? You've been looking at the future for a long time.
Well, good luck with that. Yeah, I do think we've been using the phrase digital transformation for so long, I think we've kind of forgot what it means. But essentially, in my lifetime, the world has essentially become increasingly digitalized, the experience of being a human being. You have little kids, they don't try to turn a page, they try to swipe a screen, right? It's infused every part of our life. And in the digital side of that, because of just the way digital innovation works, that the pace of change is still continuing to accelerate. The challenge is when you apply it to then a world of atoms and molecules. So if you are an industrial business, or if you're in anything where you're dealing with a physical world, there are things that slow it down. And by the way, regulatory regimes are another one.
Yes.
Both of those are necessary. So I would say at the front end, and particularly in a digital-only business. So that's media, it's finance, it's a place where it's all bits, no atoms, right? Those, I think, are the ones that are exposed to the most rapid change. And media is a great example. Business Week, which was an iconic publication of my time when I was with eRegis, was a PR agency, sold for $1.
It's incredible. Yeah, it's incredible. Well, look, Geoff, I think we could talk all day. Thank you for coming to our region, spending time with our customers, and for putting some of your thoughts to paper so that we can share that with them as well. So really, really appreciate it.
Well, it's a pleasure being here. Thanks again.